Um, Close your eyes for just a second
Okay.
and picture the ultimate creative genius. You know the archetype. You probably see someone totally isolated in a dimly lit bohemian garret somewhere.
Yeah, classic trope.
Right? Maybe you can almost smell the linseed oil from a canvas, or hear the frantic rhythmic clacking of a typewriter.
Pacing around the room, pulling their hair out.
Exactly. And this person is suddenly struck by a divine bolt of inspiration. They channel something entirely unprecedented, just conjuring pure magic out of thin air. We love this romanticized image. We really cling to it.
We do.
It's the myth of the solitary genius striking gold in a total vacuum. But what if I told you that this entire picture is not just a little bit inaccurate, but fundamentally wrong?
It is a beautiful, deeply seductive illusion, but an illusion nonetheless. If we want to truly understand where ideas actually come from, we have to gently but firmly shatter that romantic image. Because if you look closely at the history of human innovation, whether that's in art, science, or business, you quickly realize that the burden of pure originality is a modern fiction.
A total fiction.
There is a profound ancient wisdom in the book of Ecclesiastes, which states very plainly, there is no new thing under the sun.
Wow, yeah, going right to the ancient texts.
Or consider Mark Twain. He observed that 99 parts of all human intellect are plagiarisms, pure and simple, and that we should just be modest enough to admit it.
Just own it.
Exactly. Today, we aren't here to offer you a simple motivational seminar or a quick collection of life hacks. We are embarking on an intellectual deconstruction of creativity itself.
Exactly. Welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to explore the profound, sometimes highly controversial, and ultimately incredibly liberating concepts within Austin Kleon's 2012 book, Steal Like an Artist.
A phenomenal text.
It really is. And
Yeah.
we have curated a massive stack of sources just for you, the listener.
Yeah.
We're pulling not only from the book itself, which has really become a foundational text for creators everywhere, but we're also bringing in dense academic critiques,
Right.
long-form blog reviews, and vibrant, sometimes heavily contested debates from online creator communities. We are going to look at this philosophy from every possible angle.
And we must clarify our mission right from the start. The goal of this deep dive is absolutely not to endorse intellectual theft,
No.
or plagiarism, or lazy copying. Instead, our objective is to unpack the intricate architecture of creative synthesis.
Synthesis being the key word there.
Precisely. We are going to explore how releasing the crushing, paralyzing burden of having to be purely original can actually unlock your most authentic voice.
It's paradoxical but true.
It is. We will examine the liberating power of this philosophy, but we will not shy away from wading into the complex limitations and the rigorous demands it places on the creator.
Okay, let's unpack this right at the foundation. The book hits you immediately with this idea that originality is basically a myth. There's a great quote from the writer William Ralph Inge included in our sources.
I love this quote.
What is originality? Undetected plagiarism.
It's so blunt.
It really is. Now, that sounds incredibly cynical at first glance, but if you sit with it, it's actually incredibly freeing. The central thesis is that all creative work builds on what came before. Kleon uses this brilliant simple visual analogy in the book.
The parallel lines.
Yes. He tells you to draw two parallel lines on a piece of paper. You look at it and say, okay, I've created two lines. But then you look closer and realize you haven't just created two lines.
You created the space between them.
Exactly. You've also created a line of negative space running right between them.
What's fascinating here is how that simple visual exercise shifts your entire paradigm of invention. You thought you were just putting down what you knew, the two distinct lines. But simply by putting them next to each other, a third, entirely new thing merged. That negative space, that is the very essence of creative synthesis.
That emergence.
Yes. Every human being is a biological mashup of their ancestors. You are your mother, your father, and generations before them, recombined into something unique.
A literal DNA mashup.
Exactly. Similarly, every creative mind is a mashup of its influences. You do not operate in a vacuum. You are the sum of what you choose to let into your life, the cultural DNA you absorb.
And that leads right into the principle of garbage in, garbage out. If you are just a collector of influences, then your job as an artist or a software developer or a startup founder isn't to just hoard massive amounts of random information.
That's just noise.
Right, it's just noise.
Yeah.
Your job is to be a highly selective collector. You have to actively curate your inputs. The sources talk about building your own creative family tree, which is an exercise I absolutely love.
It's a very pragmatic exercise.
It is. You don't just sit down and try to study the entire history of your discipline, because you'll choke on it. It's too vast. Instead, you study one single hero deeply. You find out everything about them.
Every single thing.
And then you find 3 people that your hero loved and was influenced by, and then you study them.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what you are doing is deliberately curating your intellectual DNA. You are consciously placing yourself within a lineage.
A lineage, I like that.
You are realizing that you are part of an ongoing historical conversation. Marcel Duchamp once said, "I don't believe in art, I believe in artists."
That's powerful.
By climbing your own creative family tree, you are finding your intellectual ancestors. You start to see how ideas morph, mutate, and change over decades and centuries.
You see the through line.
And once you truly understand that genealogy, the pressure to conjure something completely novel from the ether completely evaporates. You realize your job is just to add the next sentence to an ongoing conversation.
But wait, I have to push back here. Because the word steal is incredibly provocative, and we really have to draw a hard line.
Absolutely, we do.
If I just go onto GitHub, copy someone else's code, change the variables, and call it my own app, am I an artist? Or if I take a melody from Mozart and a drum beat from Dr. Dre and just loop them together, haven't I just made a lazy mashup?
You have.
Right. So at what point does the mashup actually become art? We have to define the boundaries of good theft versus bad theft. Otherwise, we're just advocating for intellectual property theft.
This raises an important question, and it really is the crux of the entire philosophy. It is the boundary line between being a creator and being a parasite.
A parasite, yeah.
Bad theft is plagiarism. Plagiarism is stealing from one single source, skimming the absolute surface of the work, and trying to pass it off as your own original labor.
Just lifting it wholesale.
Good theft, on the other hand, is deep, transformative research. It is artistic synthesis. As the writer Wilson Misner put it, if you steal from one author, it's plagiarism. If you steal from many, it's research.
I love that distinction.
Good theft means stealing from 100 different sources, combining them, transforming them through the crucible of your own perspective, and creating something that serves a new purpose.
And it's not just about the volume of people you steal from. It's about what specific elements you are stealing. The sources explicitly warn against mimicking the surface of somebody's work.
The superficial stuff.
Exactly. If you just copy the style, say you just copy the exact lighting setup and color grading of your favorite filmmaker, you're just making a cheap, hollow knockoff.
A carbon copy.
You have to steal the thinking behind the style. You don't want to just look like your heroes. You want to see the world the way your heroes do. You want to internalize their process, their worldview, the way they approach problem solving.
Precisely. To use a legal parallel, this touches on the concept of transformative use in copyright law.
Oh, that's an interesting angle.
For a use of copyrighted material to be considered fair use rather than infringement, one of the key tests is whether the new work transforms the original by adding new expression, meaning, or message.
It has to do something new.
When you steal the thinking, you are learning the underlying grammar of your hero's creativity. You are taking their conceptual tools and using them to build your own distinct house, rather than just taking a photograph of their house and claiming you built it.
Like,
This transformative labor, the intellectual heavy lifting of synthesis, is what separates the hack from the true artist.
that conceptual grammar is such a great way to put it. And learning that grammar brings us to the actual mechanics of the book. Kleon lays out 10 principles of creative synthesis.
He does.
Let's really dig into the first cluster of these ideas, which revolve around initiation and identity. The core tenets are steal like an artist, don't wait until you know who you are to get started, and write the book you want to read.
Very actionable.
Very. But I want to spend some real time on that second one. The absolute paralysis of waiting to know who you are before you make anything.
It's so common.
Think about it. How many times have you, listening to this right now, sat staring at a blank screen thinking, I need to find my unique voice before I can record this podcast, or I need to define my personal brand before I launch this product?
That hesitation is a profound psychological trap. It is deeply rooted in imposter syndrome, which is that clinical phenomenon where people are fundamentally unable to internalize their accomplishments and constantly feel like a fraud who is about to be exposed.
The feeling that someone is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, you don't belong here.
Exactly. What the book so brilliantly points out is that even the masters, the historical titans you look up to, were often just showing up, highly anxious, and winging it.
Winging it.
Nobody is born with a fully formed style or voice. We don't exit the womb knowing exactly who we are as creators. Identity is not a shiny object you find in the woods and then use to create art. Identity is forged in the actual crucible of making the art.
You find yourself in the work. The advice here is a variation of the classic, fake it till you make it. But we need to be clear, not in a sleazy, manipulative Silicon Valley Theranos kind of way.
Definitely not.
It means behaving like the person you want to become, going through the physical motions of creation until the habits of that person instill a true internal sense of self. Our sources bring up a fantastic, highly detailed historical example, the Beatles.
A perfect example.
Right. Now, we think of John Lennon and Paul McCartney as these unparalleled, purely original songwriting geniuses who descended from the heavens to change music forever. But that is completely ignoring their actual history.
They started as a cover band.
They started as a gritty cover band. They spent years in the sweaty clubs of Hamburg, Germany, playing 8 hours a night, just hammering out covers of Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Buddy Holly.
And what's fascinating here is the specific reason why they transitioned to writing their own songs.
Right, this is crazy.
According to Paul McCartney, they didn't sit down one day with a grand, unified vision of altering the trajectory of global pop culture. They only started writing original material as a pragmatic defense mechanism.
To protect their set list.
Exactly. To avoid other bands in Liverpool being able to play their exact set list. They started by obsessively copying their heroes, trying to sound exactly like American rhythm and blues artists.
And they failed.
And they found their own revolutionary identity in their failure to perfectly replicate those heroes. Their Liverpool accents, their specific musical limitations, their varied influences, all of that led into the covers until the covers mutated into original songs.
And mutated.
As another quote from the source's notes, you start out as a phony and become real.
You start out as a phony and become real. And that perfectly segues into the next principle. Write the book you want to read, or build the app you want to use, or start the business you wish you could patronize.
Create what you crave.
Don't create what you think the market algorithm wants right now, or what you think will make you look smart to your peers. Look at the landscape of your heroes, find the blind spots, find the gaps, and fill them.
Which is essentially a call for strategic BAP analysis, but wrapped in creative passion. You are using your curated influences to spot what is missing in the ecosystem. You are synthesizing everything you love, noticing the negative space between those things, and deciding to occupy that space yourself.
Let's pivot to the physicality of creation, because this is where the philosophy meets the neuroscience. Kleon strongly advocates for using your hands and emphasizes the importance of side projects and hobbies.
Getting physical.
Yeah. Now, I know for our listeners, this is incredibly relevant. We live our entire lives glued to glowing rectangles. A lot of us work completely remote, digital-first jobs. But Kleon argues for the sensory, physical, messy importance of analog tools. Why does he say the digital screen is actually detrimental for the initial generation of ideas?
Because the computer screen, by its very design, puts us fundamentally into editor mode rather than creator mode.
Editor mode.
Yes. When you are looking at a screen, you are immediately tempted to hit the backspace key, to format the font, to correct red squiggly typos, to delete a thought before an idea has even fully formed in your mind.
I do that constantly. I'll write half a sentence and immediately delete it.
We all do. The physical act of creation, using a pen, cutting paper, moving physical sticky notes around a massive whiteboard, engages the body in a completely different way. Our nervous system isn't just a one-way street from the brain to the hand.
Right.
The physical, tactile motion of our hands actually kickstarts our brain into a different, more lateral mode of thinking.
Okay, let's unpack this from a neurological standpoint, because I read an amazing study about this while prepping for the deep dive.
Yeah.
When you step away from the hyper-focused, goal-oriented environment of a screen, you activate what neuroscientists call the default mode network in your brain.
The DMN, yes.
This is the network that lights up when you are daydreaming, when you are walking without a destination, or when you are doing something tactile and repetitive. It's the brain's background processing system, and it is entirely responsible for connecting disparate, seemingly unrelated ideas.
It connects the dots.
Exactly. The book suggests literally having two workstations. An analog desk with markers, paper, and physical materials for the messy, judgment-free generation phase. and a separate digital desk for the execution, formatting, and refinement phase.
That physical separation of spaces is crucial because it creates a psychological boundary between ideation and execution. And speaking of activating that default mode network, that ties directly into the importance of side projects and hobbies.
Right, productive procrastination.
The book discusses this concept of productive procrastination. We all know the cliche of getting your absolute best, most world-shattering ideas in the shower or while mindlessly washing the dishes, right? That isn't an accident. When your hands are busy with a low-stakes task that is completely unrelated to your main stressful project, your subconscious brain is finally allowed off the leash to wander and cross-pollinate ideas.
It's the friction between our digital jobs and our analog brains. If you are relentlessly hammering away at one singular coding problem for 10 hours straight on a monitor, you develop severe tunnel vision.
You can't see the forest for the trees.
But if you walk away and spend an hour tending to your tomato garden, the lateral thinking kicks in.
Precisely. It is cognitive incubation. By maintaining multiple disparate interests and deliberately allowing yourself to bounce between them when you hit a wall, you create an internal intellectual environment.
So you're building a system.
Yes, a sudden breakthrough in your gardening hobby might miraculously provide the exact conceptual framework you need to solve that coding problem. You are giving your brain the raw materials and the relaxed space it needs to synthesize.
So that covers the internal ecosystem of your brain. Let's expand out and talk about the ecosystem of the world at large. The next principles focus on how we interact with our environment. Do good work and share it. Geography is no longer our master. And be nice because the world is a small town.
These are vital.
Here's where the anxiety really kicks in for a lot of people, because sharing work in the modern digital age is absolutely terrifying. You are opening yourself up to a global arena of critics. But Kleon offers a very counterintuitive comfort here. He says that obscurity is a superpower.
We have been conditioned by social media metrics to view obscurity as a profound failure.
Yeah, if you don't have 1 million followers, you're failing.
Exactly. We want the massive audience, the thousands of likes, the blue check mark, and the external validation immediately upon hitting publish. But when you are obscure, when absolutely nobody knows who you are or cares what you are doing, you possess the ultimate creative freedom.
The freedom to mess it.
The freedom to experiment, to fail wildly, to make truly terrible, embarrassing work without the crushing weight of public expectation or commercial pressure ruining your process.
That pressure can paralyze you.
Once you acquire a massive audience, that freedom is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to reclaim because you become beholden to your own brand. So the lesson is to fiercely protect and enjoy your obscurity while you have it. Use it as a laboratory.
I love that reframing. Use it as a laboratory. And when you do decide to share, you don't have to share the polished, flawless, finished masterpiece. Share your dots. Share your messy process. Let people see the analog desk.
Process over product sometimes.
Now, in this digital age, geography obviously doesn't dictate your success the way it used to.
Yeah.
You don't have to pack up and move to Paris to be a recognized artist or move to Silicon Valley to be a tech innovator. You can build your community entirely online.
But there is a caveat.
Right. Our sources note that the book also issues a warning here. While geography doesn't limit you, maintaining a commuter's mindset is vital. You still need to physically travel, to leave your comfort zone, to expose your brain to new physical environments, new smells, new languages, so it doesn't get intellectually lazy.
The brain thrives on novelty.
Yeah.
If you only ever look at the exact same 4 walls, your inputs become stagnant, which means your outputs will become stagnant.
Garbage in, garbage out again.
Precisely. And within that global digital community you build, there is a principle that sounds simple but is vital for longevity. Be nice.
Just be nice.
The internet has mathematically made the entire globe a very small, highly interconnected town. If we connect this to the bigger picture of career sustainability, professional longevity is rarely built on sheer isolated genius. It is built on kindness, reliability, and collaboration.
And part of being nice is learning how to handle the inevitable internet rage. The sources mention this incredible concept of channeling internet anger into productive output. We've all been there. You read a comment or a post that makes your blood boil, and you spend an hour drafting a scathing, multi-paragraph reply.
The urge is so strong.
Don't do it. Instead of getting into a useless screaming match in a comment section, use that fiery, high-octane energy to go make something better. As the developer Andre Torres is quoted in the sources, complain about the way other people make software by making software.
That is the ultimate alchemy of the creator, transforming frustration into invention.
Alchemy, yes.
Furthermore, you have to deeply internalize the mantra that validation is for parking.
Such a great line.
You cannot control, predict, or engineer how the world will receive your work. If you tie your self-worth to the applause, you will be destroyed by the silence.
Wow.
Often, by the time the public finally catches on to what is brilliant about a piece of work you did, you will likely be bored to death with it and have moved on to a completely new fascination.
Which perfectly sets up the final two principles in this section, and these might be the most contentious ones for some people. Be boring, and creativity is subtraction. Let's take a sledgehammer to another massive myth right now. The romanticized, tortured, chaotic artist.
We need to dismantle this one.
You know the archetype. The person living in a messy loft, drinking absinthe, alienating all their friends, and staying up for 3 days straight fueled by mania and espresso to produce a masterpiece. Kleon says absolutely not. If you want to make good work over a long period of time, live a boring life.
The tortured artist trope is an insidious recipe for burnout, addiction, and misery, not sustainable creativity.
It's toxic.
True, enduring creative output requires immense, sustained physical and mental energy. To have that kind of energy, you need militant discipline. You need a stable routine, you need to sleep 8 hours a night, you need to take care of yourself physically.
Basic human maintenance.
And perhaps most controversially, for the fiercely independent artistic types, you need financial responsibility.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here. We all know artists who produce their absolute best, most world-shifting work while completely spiraling out of control. Look at Amy Winehouse, or Vincent van Gogh, or Hunter S. Thompson. They were the definition of chaos, and their work is legendary.
That is a very common counterargument, but it suffers from massive survivorship bias.
Okay, explain that.
We look at the brilliant output and we incorrectly assume that the chaos caused the brilliance. In reality, the brilliant output usually happened in spite of the chaos.
In spite of it.
And more importantly, that chaos ultimately cut their generative years tragically short. If you are constantly terrified about how you are going to pay your rent next week, your art becomes desperate. It becomes anxious.
Survival mode.
Maintaining a day job isn't a betrayal of your art. A day job provides structure, routine, and crucially freedom from financial stress. A boring, highly stable, predictable life provides the solid runway from which your mind can safely take wild, unpredictable creative leaps.
A boring life is the anchor that lets the kite fly high. I love that. And that leads to the ultimate rule, the 10th principle. Creativity is subtraction. We live in an era of infinite paralyzing choices. You can open software right now that has 10,000 different synth sounds. Limitless possibilities actually kill creativity.
They absolutely do.
If I hand you a piece of paper and tell you to draw anything, your brain will likely freeze. The sheer vastness of anything is overwhelming. But if I hand you that same paper and tell you to draw a bicycle using only straight lines and the color blue, your brain immediately starts problem solving. You start working immediately.
That is the beautiful paradox of constraints. In an age of extreme information abundance, the creator who succeeds is not the one who includes everything, but the one who figures out what to ruthlessly leave out.
Ruthless editing.
Our sources mention a legendary anecdote about Dr. Seuss that perfectly illustrates this. He wrote The Cat in the Hat using a vocabulary of only 236 words.
That's pretty small already.
Yes, but then his editor, Bennett Cerf, bet him $50 that he couldn't write an entire cohesive children's book using only 50 different words.
50 words. That's nothing. That's barely a paragraph.
Exactly. It seems like an impossible, suffocating limitation. But Dr. Seuss accepted the bet. He painstakingly synthesized, edited, and arranged those 50 words over and over.
Just moving the pieces around.
The result of that massive constraint: Green Eggs and Ham. It became one of the best-selling, most enduring children's books of all time. As the artist Saul Steinberg brilliantly noted, what we respond to in any work of art is the artist's struggle against his or her limitations.
Struggle is the art.
When you actively impose artificial limitations on your tools, your time, or the scope of your project, you force your brain to innovate around those specific barriers. Constraints do not limit freedom. Constraints equal freedom.
So what does this all mean for us today? This brings us to a crucial pivot in our deep dive. Applying this philosophy to the modern world. Steal Like an Artist came out in 2012. The internet was a fundamentally different place back then.
Very different.
Instagram was barely a year old. TikTok didn't exist. Today, we are living in the hyper-accelerated age of algorithms and the relentless grinding pressure of the creator economy to constantly, endlessly produce content. How do these lessons hold up when the machine demands a new video every single day?
I would argue that they resonate even more profoundly today than they did a decade ago.
Really?
The demand for digital content is an insatiable maw. If you rely solely on spontaneous, original inspiration to feed that algorithm, you will be crushed by the demand for consistency. You will burn out in a matter of months.
Yeah, you just run dry.
This is exactly where the concept of the swipe file, or as old school journalists call it, the morgue file, becomes an absolute lifeline for the modern creator.
The morgue file.
Mm.
I love this morbid terminology. It's where you keep the dead things so you can reanimate them later like Dr. Frankenstein. Let's explain the mechanics of this. What exactly goes into a swipe file?
It acts as a highly curated external memory drive. It can be a physical folder of cutout magazine pages, a massive Notion database, or a dedicated photo album on your phone.
It's just a central repository.
Yes. When you are doom scrolling or reading or watching a movie, and something sparks your interest, a specific color palette, a clever turn of phrase, a unique structural transition in a video, you don't just consume it and forget it, you aggressively capture it and put it in the swipe file.
Right.
Then, when it's Tuesday morning and you are facing the pressure to produce your weekly newsletter or video, you don't stare at a blank screen hoping for inspiration. You open your swipe file. You look at the pieces you've been selectively collecting.
You pull from the genealogy.
You leverage your curated influences to maintain your output. It demystifies the process. It turns creation from a magical, exhausting conjuring act into a systematic, sustainable process of synthesis.
And then there's the massive, glowing, multi-trillion-dollar elephant in the room, artificial intelligence.
Yes.
We cannot talk about stealing like an artist in this decade without talking about AI, because large language models and image generators are literally the ultimate mathematical embodiment of this exact philosophy.
They are.
They scrape billions of data points, they synthesize them, they remix them, and they generate output. If a machine can perfectly synthesize human information and perfectly mimic any style in seconds, what happens to us? What is the value of a human doing the synthesis?
What's fascinating here is that this is undoubtedly the existential question of our time for anyone in a creative or knowledge-based field. To understand this, we have to look at how AI actually works.
The mechanics of it.
These models use weights and parameters to predict the most mathematically probable next word or next pixel based on the massive lineage of human data they've consumed. They are, quite literally, stealing from millions of artists simultaneously to find the median result.
Finding the average.
But if an AI can execute the stealing and the remixing flawlessly, instantly, and without fatigue, the entire value paradigm of art shifts. The value of human creation shifts away from the perfection of the execution and moves entirely toward the flaws of the human condition.
Okay, let's unpack this. The value is in the flaws.
Yes. A machine will make a statistically perfect copy. It will give you the immaculate average. But a human hand physically cannot replicate a masterpiece perfectly.
We just don't have the motor control.
When a human tries to copy something and inevitably fails, that resulting tremor in the brushstroke, that slight, weird deviation in tonal quality, that highly specific quirk of personal bias that bleeds into the writing, that is the creative fingerprint.
That is such a powerful, stabilizing thought in the face of all this technological anxiety. The flaw isn't a bug. The flaw is the feature. Our sheer inability to be mathematically perfect machines is precisely what makes our art authentic.
It's what makes it human.
And in a world that is about to be absolutely flooded with technically flawless, mathematically averaged AI content, human authenticity, with all its messy, unpredictable, weird deviations, becomes infinitely more valuable than perceived originality.
Precisely. AI is the ultimate averager. It produces the ultimate median of human thought. But true human creativity, deeply influenced by lived experience, trauma, joy, and physical limitations, operates out in the margins and the extremes.
The edges.
That is where the soul lives. A machine can write a perfectly structured pop song based on the rules of music theory, but it cannot write a song about the specific, agonizing heartbreak of losing a dog you've had for 15 years because the machine has never felt the cold tile of a vet's office.
Wow. Yeah, it doesn't have the lived experience.
The synthesis is elevated by the human experience.
Which brings us right into the emotional core of this entire discussion. Because let's be real for a second. Even with all this high-level philosophy, even knowing about the default mode network, the swipe file, and the genealogy of ideas, staring at the blank canvas is still deeply, viscerally terrifying.
It is the hardest part.
I want to talk directly to you, the listener, right now, because I suffer from this immensely. It is emotionally daunting to look at your work, the thing you poured your heart into, and realize you are just an amalgamation of your heroes. There's this gnawing fear in the back of my head. Am I just a total fraud? Am I ever going to produce something that doesn't just look like a cheap knockoff of the podcasters and writers I admire? It's the anxiety of influence.
That anxiety of influence is a very heavy, very common shadow. It is the dual fear of producing terrible work and the deeper existential fear of never truly finding your own independent identity. But we have to actively reframe that fear. We have to learn to look at the beauty of falling short. You mentioned earlier the quote from Conan O'Brien in our sources, which he delivered during a commencement address. It is one of the most poignant, articulate observations on this specific topic.
Yeah, his Dartmouth speech.
He was talking about how he tried so hard to be David Letterman and failed. He said, "It is our failure to become our perceived ideal that ultimately defines us and makes us unique."
Think about that for a second. You aim for the stars.
Yeah.
You aim to be exactly like your absolute idol. And because you are a flawed human, you miss.
You inevitably miss.
But where you land, that exact coordinate where your ambition collided with your limitations, that is who you are.
Exactly. Young comedians emulate their heroes. They study Richard Pryor or George Carlin. They try to mimic their cadence. They inevitably fall short. And in that exact awkward gap between their ambition and their execution, their own distinct comedic voice is born.
It's born in the gap.
You should not just accept your limitations. You should embrace them tightly. When you try to draw a perfect, immaculate circle like Giotto and your hand inevitably shakes, that specific tremor belongs exclusively to you. No one else on earth has your specific tremor.
It's entirely yours.
The slight deviation in color choices you make because your eyes literally perceive light a bit differently, the clunky syntax in your writing because of the specific regional dialect you grew up speaking, these aren't failures of imitation that you need to edit out. They are the birth pangs of your identity.
It's exactly like the beautiful Japanese art of kintsugi. When a piece of pottery is broken, they don't throw it away or try to hide the cracks with invisible glue.
They repair it with gold.
They repair the breaks with gold. The break, the flaw, the history of the object becomes the most beautiful and highly valued part of the piece. Your failure to be a perfect copycat is your gold.
If we can truly internalize and accept that, then the paralyzing fear of the blank canvas diminishes significantly. You realize you aren't stepping up to the canvas or the keyboard or the drafting table to prove your divine, unprecedented originality to the world.
Right.
You are simply stepping up to conduct an ongoing experiment in synthesis, fully knowing that your humanity, your specific history, and your inherent flaws will guarantee the final result is uniquely yours.
This is incredibly liberating. But of course, no deep dive on this show is complete without rigorously looking at the other side of the coin. We can't just shower this book with praise.
No, we have to look at the criticism.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We have to dive into the critiques, the limitations, and the deep nuance of appropriation. Because our sources provide some serious, highly intellectual pushback to Kleon's philosophy. Let's start with what reviewers call the how-to paradox. This was pointed out by several readers and critics in our stack, and it is a trap I think almost everyone listening has fallen into at some point.
Yes, the dangerous, intoxicating loop of consuming advice.
Oh, it's so easy to get caught in.
Books about creativity, including Steele, like an artist, can be incredibly seductive. They offer a massive, immediate dopamine hit to the brain. When you read a chapter about setting up an analog desk or you spend 3 hours organizing a complex Notion template for your new swipe file, your brain incorrectly registers that as doing work.
It feels like work.
You feel incredibly productive, inspired, and motivated sitting on your couch reading about creativity. But in reality, it is just a highly elaborate, socially acceptable form of procrastination.
Right. Reading a book about using your hands is fundamentally not the same thing as actually getting your hands dirty. You can get trapped in this endless loop of consuming how-to content, watching YouTube tutorials about productivity, feeling that third eye-opening intellectual high, but never actually transitioning into the hard, boring, intensely frustrating labor of making the damn thing.
The execution.
The advice essentially becomes a vice. You become a professional preparer.
And that psychological trap leads directly into the more structural, intellectual pushback we found from academic and professional circles within our sources. The plagiarism debate.
This is a big one.
There is a very legitimate, highly nuanced critique that the steal like an artist philosophy, if it is misunderstood by an amateur or taken to a lazy extreme, heavily undervalues the sheer agonizing cognitive labor of true invention.
We found this fascinating, highly heated debate on a Reddit writing and art forum in our sources. Someone pushed back hard on Kleon's idea that everything is just a copy or a remix. They used a really profound woodworker analogy.
The tree analogy, yes.
They said, yes, obviously the tree in the forest provided the raw materials, the wood. The artist didn't invent wood. But it is incredibly reductive, almost insulting, to look at a masterfully hand-carved, intricately detailed piece of furniture and say, well, the artist just stole from the tree, there's nothing original here.
That is a brilliant, highly clarifying analogy because it highlights the absolute necessity of transformative labor. The plagiarism or the stealing in Kleon's framework goes only as far as gathering the raw materials. It is gathering the wood.
That's getting the wood.
But the artist must still engage in the immense, solitary, often physically and emotionally agonizing labor of carving something entirely new and worthwhile out of those materials. The primary critique of the book is that its breezy, accessible tone might make the process sound far too easy.
Like anyone could just mash things together.
It might inadvertently encourage a cavalier, lazy attitude toward appropriation, blurring the vital ethical imperative to transform a work rather than just blindly transpose it.
We absolutely have to objectively present both sides of this friction, because there is the incredibly liberating, psychologically soothing nature of remixing, which successfully unblocks paralyzed creators. But towering right next to it is the rigorous ethical imperative to honor the line between adaptive reuse and lazy parasitic copying.
The line is thin, but crucial.
If you just grab someone else's chord progression, slap a slightly different vocal melody on it, and call it a day without putting it through the crucible of your own intense labor, without adding your unique perspective or changing its fundamental meaning, you aren't stealing like an artist. You're just a thief looking for a shortcut.
Furthermore, when we step out of the philosophical realm and into professional commercial spheres, the cold, hard legal realities of copyright law do not always align with the breezy, philosophical ideals of artistic synthesis.
The lawyers get involved.
Exactly. While Pablo Picasso might famously declare that good artists copy, great artists steal, a modern intellectual property lawyer, backed by corporate media entities, will have a very different, very financially actionable perspective.
A cease and desist perspective.
Creators today must constantly navigate the tightrope of tension between drawing deep, necessary inspiration from their lineage and respecting the hard legal boundaries of intellectual property. The synthesis must be profound enough, the labor intense enough, that the new work demonstrably stands on its own as a distinct, legally defensible entity.
It's the difference between taking the raw ingredients, the flour, sugar, and eggs, from someone's kitchen to bake your own entirely unique cake recipe versus just sneaking in, stealing their fully finished decorated cake, and lazily writing your own name and icing on the top. One is synthesis, the other is theft.
Exactly. And to bring in one final, highly illustrative example from our academic sources, a professor at the Open College of the Arts discussed a conceptual artist named Simon Morris.
Oh, this is wild.
Morris engaged in a project where he literally, physically copied out one single page of Jack Kerouac's iconic novel On the Road every single day.
Just retyping it.
Now, on the surface, this is the literal definition of plagiarism. But even in this act of extreme near plagiarism, it was deeply generative for him as a creator. By typing the words, he physically learned the rhythm of Kerouac's prose.
He internalized the pacing?
He felt the placement of the hyphens, the breathless, leaning forward momentum of the text. He stole the underlying mechanics to truly understand the master from the inside out.
Right.
But, and this is the crucial part, he then took that mechanical understanding and used it to inform his own entirely separate, deeply personal work. That is the staggering depth of study and transformation required to make the theft legitimate.
Okay, we have covered a truly massive amount of ground today. Let's take a breath and start synthesizing this entire deep dive. We started with the cinematic, intimidating myth of the solitary genius working in a vacuum, and we have systematically deconstructed it down to its bare studs.
We really have.
We've explored the neuroscience of analog tools, the legal boundaries of transformation, the survival tactics of the modern creator economy, and the emotional weight of imposter syndrome. And through it all, we've learned that stealing like an artist is absolutely not an excuse for intellectual laziness or a shortcut to fame. It is, in fact, a profound, heavy responsibility.
It is the responsibility to study the masters who came before you so deeply and with such profound reverence that you actually learn their underlying language.
You learn their grammar.
And you learn that language not so you can mimic them like a cheap parrot, but so you can eventually use their hard-won vocabulary to speak your own distinct, undeniable truth to the world.
If we connect this to the bigger picture for you, the listener right now, whatever your specific field is, whether you are writing thousands of lines of back-end code, designing sustainable urban buildings, managing a complex corporate team, plotting a sci-fi novel, or painting a massive canvas, you are an active participant in a grand, sweeping, historical human collage.
A part of the continuum.
You do not have to invent the colors. You do not have to invent the concept of the brush. You just have to collect the pieces that resonate with your soul and arrange them in a way that is rigorously true to your lived experience. The crushing, paralyzing pressure to conjure pure, unprecedented genius from thin air is officially lifted.
You are fully permitted to be influenced. You are permitted to embrace the things you deeply love, to aggressively collect them in your swipe file, and to let them shape your intellectual DNA. Your only true obligation in this process is to do the hard, solitary, transformative work.
The carving of the wood.
You must allow your own human flaws, your distinct tremors, and your unique perspectives to filter those acquired influences into something new. Something that pushes the grand human conversation forward, even if just by 1 inch.
Which leaves us with one final lingering thought. A philosophical question to mull over as you close out of this deep dive and go back to your analog desk, your digital studio, or your beautifully boring life. We've established today that everything you create is a carefully synthesized, beautifully flawed theft of the things you love.
It is a mashup.
It is a massive mashup of your heroes, filtered through your own deeply personal imperfections. So, looking closely at the work you are doing right now, what specific pieces of your own imperfect, deeply human work are you leaving behind for the next generation to steal?